My parents beat me up at my brother's party for not giving them my $650,000 condo. I sold their house. My name is Jessica Morgan, and I'm 33 years old. I'm living the dream I built for myself. A successful career as a senior product manager at a fast-growing tech company in Austin, Texas, and a beautiful condo overlooking the picturesque Lady Bird Lake. It's more than just walls and furniture. It's a symbol of years of hard work, penny pinching, sweat, and tears. It's worth about $650,000 in today's market, and it's my pride, my reward, my safe haven, my sacred space. I'm single, focused on my career, and enjoying the independent life I've created in the vibrant city of Austin. But the price of success can sometimes be jealousy, and demands from the very people who should be most happy for you. My relationship with my family, my parents, Richard and Linda, and my younger brother, Liam, has always been a complicated mess. There is love, sure, but it is overshadowed by hidden pressures, unspoken criticism, and especially the financial dependence I have tolerated in the past. And then, the final line was crossed on what should have been a joyous evening a few weeks ago at Liam's very own engagement party. The soft jazz music, the cheerful laughter of friends and relatives seemed to come from another world, a world I no longer belonged to. I was standing in a corner of the lavish banquet hall that Liam and his future fiancée, Sarah, had chosen, trying to catch my breath, trying to stop the tears of humiliation and pain that threatened to spill over. My left cheek was still burning, marked by 5 finger marks from my mother, Linda, who had slapped me hard. My right wrist was throbbing where my father, Richard, had gripped it so hard just minutes before that I felt like my bones were about to shatter. "You are an unfilial son of a bitch, you selfish dog!" My father roared in the middle of the banquet hall. Unfortunately, the loud music drowned it out, but the curious and surprised gazes of a few guests standing nearby still managed to turn towards us. Saliva flew out as he shouted at me. "That apartment in Austin is too big, too luxurious for you alone. Your parents are old, their health is failing. They need a decent place to retire, near a good hospital in Austin. You owe them that. You have a responsibility to repay them." Filial piety? How? By giving up the fruits of my decades of hard work? By handing over the $500,000 condo that I had worked so hard to earn? All because I once again, and I swore to myself that this would be the last time, flatly refused their insanely unreasonable request that I give or indefinitely lend my beloved condo in Austin so they could move in and retire. My mother, who had just slapped me so hard, just stood there, her eyes filled with tears, not because she felt sorry for me, but perhaps because she was angry and disappointed that she had not achieved her goal. She repeated the familiar refrain. "Jessica, why are you so stubborn? We only want the best for you. How can you live alone forever? Isn't it better to have us around to take care of you?" Take care of me? Or let me take care of them, catering to their dependent lifestyle? The last door of tolerance in me slammed shut. It was no longer innuendos, no longer constant mental pressure. Now it was physical violence. They attacked me. Right here, in the middle of my brother's engagement party, humiliating me in front of everyone. Did they think that would scare me? Make me bow to their demands? No, they were wrong. They had just crossed the final line, the line of friendship, of minimal respect. And they had unwittingly signed the deed to the house they lived in comfortably in suburban Dallas. The house where I had grown up, filled with childhood memories. The house that, ironically, was legally in my name. To understand the irony and motivation behind the cold decision I am about to make, you need to know a part of my past that my family has always tried to hide. My $650,000 condo in Austin didn't fall from the sky. It was the result of more than a decade of relentless work in the competitive tech industry. I graduated from college with a degree in software engineering, started at the bottom, worked hard, learned constantly, and worked my way up to project management positions, eventually reaching my current senior product manager position. I saved every paycheck, cut my personal expenses, invested wisely, and finally was able to afford this dream condo on my own. It's a symbol of my independence, an accomplishment I'm most proud of. My parents' financial situation, meanwhile, was a stark contrast. My father retired early from a mediocre middle management job with a meager pension. He tried several small businesses, but they failed, leaving him with unaccounted for debts. My mother was mostly a stay-at-home mom or worked low-paying, part-time jobs. They lived in the same rundown house in the Dallas suburbs where Liam and I grew up. Despite their modest income, they tried to maintain an appearance of well-being, spending more than they could afford, perhaps to save face with neighbors and friends. My younger brother Liam, though a nice guy, had a troubled career, working as a freelance graphic designer, earning an unstable income and probably still depending on his parents and me to some extent. My parents' story of homeownership began about 7 or 8 years ago, when I was in my early 20s and had just started earning a decent income from my first job after a promotion. At the time, my parents were on the verge of losing their home. Dad's bad investments, combined with Mom's uncontrolled spending habits, had left them deep in credit card debt and a looming mortgage they couldn't afford. Their credit score was near zero and no bank would lend them money or refinance. Foreclosure loomed over them. They came to me crying, complaining, using all kinds of words to attack the love and responsibility of a child. They talked about having to live on the street, about being ashamed in front of the neighbors, about losing their only home. My heart ached. Even though there were times when I was tired of their dependence, I could not bear to see my parents lose their home. I made a huge decision at that time. I took out all the savings I had saved from my early working years, plus took out a personal loan with a pretty high interest rate, to pay off the remaining mortgage and save their house from foreclosure. It was a huge amount of money for me at that time. It was almost all I had. But I didn't do it without conditions. I knew my parents. I knew that without a clear legal bond, they would likely fall further into debt and risk losing their home again. To protect the large sums of money I had already spent, and more importantly, to prevent their future irresponsible financial habits regarding the house, I consulted a lawyer. On his advice, I made a precondition to my rescue. The legal title to the house would be transferred entirely to my name. My parents would be allowed to continue living there rent-free, as if it were still their own home, with the sole condition that they would be responsible for their own living expenses, property taxes, and basic maintenance. At that time, in desperation because they were about to lose their house, they did not hesitate to agree. All the legal documents regarding the transfer of ownership were duly signed at the law office. Legally, I was the sole and legal owner of that house. At first, the arrangement seemed to work out. My parents continued to live in the house, and I was assured that at least they had a safe roof over their heads and my investment was protected. I never had any intention of reclaiming the house or evicting them. To me, it was just a necessary precaution. But perhaps having to live in a house under his daughter's name had silently gnawed at my father's self-esteem and created a vague sense of being controlled in both of our minds. As I became more and more successful in my career, especially after I bought an expensive apartment in Austin, the hidden jealousy and sense of entitlement to my daughter's achievements began to rise strongly. At first, it was just hints. "Oh, your apartment is so beautiful and spacious. Can you live there alone? Austin has a really good climate, not as humid as here, good for the health of the elderly." Then gradually it became more direct suggestions. "Why don't you come to Austin to live with me for a while? Liam is about to get married, this house will be left to him, daughters should take care of their parents." And finally, over the past year or so, it has turned into increasingly blatant and unreasonable demands. "Jessica, we've decided. We're going to sell this house in Dallas, take some retirement money, and move to Austin to live in your apartment. You move out and rent somewhere else temporarily. Or, give us that apartment as a gift. That's your responsibility." I kept refusing. I explained that the apartment was mine, the result of my hard work where I built my private life. I offered to help them financially if they were really struggling, to find them a suitable apartment in Austin if they wanted to move closer to me, but absolutely not my apartment. My refusal made them increasingly angry and disappointed. They started to put more pressure on me, calling me constantly, blaming me, and recounting their upbringing. They dragged Liam into the matter, forcing him to call his sister to advise. The family atmosphere became extremely heavy every time I visited home. And the climax of their unreasonable demands and bottomless greed was the violent act at Liam's engagement party. Leaving the party in physical and emotional pain, I no longer felt torn or hesitant. The extreme anger had turned into cold determination. They had personally severed the last ties of friendship. They had attacked me out of greed. Now, I would use the legal power they had given me years ago to protect myself and set an iron line that could not be crossed. The next Monday morning, the first thing I did when I got to the office was not to check my work email. I closed the door to my private office and called a reputable Dallas law firm specializing in real estate and family law, whom I had researched over the weekend. I laid out the whole story to the attorney, Mrs. Peterson, clearly and concisely. I emphasized, I was the sole legal owner of the house according to the fully notarized transfer documents. My parents were living there based on a verbal agreement to stay rent-free, and I wanted to sell the house immediately. I also did not hesitate to describe the details of the attack at the party so that Mrs. Peterson would understand the seriousness of the situation and the reason behind my seemingly sudden and harsh decision. Ms. Peterson listened attentively. After reviewing the copies of paperwork I emailed her, she confirmed that my ownership was legal and undisputed. She advised me on the legal process required to regain use of my property. The first step was to send my parents a formal notice of termination and order to vacate, giving them a deadline under Texas law to vacate the home, usually 30 or 60 days. At the same time as the owner, I had every right to hire a real estate agent and begin listing the home immediately, without their consent. "Are you sure you want to do this, Miss Morgan?" Mrs. Peterson asked one last time, perhaps to make sure I understood the implications. "I am certain, ma'am," I replied, without a moment's hesitation. "This is a necessary action to protect myself. I have given full power of attorney to Mrs. Peterson and a reputable Dallas real estate firm she recommended to handle all legal and transactional matters. I do not wish to be directly involved in any further confrontation with my parents. All communication will be through an attorney." A few days later, a formal but firm letter from Peterson's law office, demanding that Richard and Linda Vance vacate the house within 60 days, was sent by registered mail to their home address. At the same time, a prominent red and white "for sale" sign, with the brokerage firm's name and phone number, was placed neatly in the green yard, the yard where I had played as a child, in front of the house where they had lived for nearly 30 years, which every neighbor knew as Mr. and Mrs. Morgan's house. The bomb actually exploded. My parents' reaction, as I've been told discreetly by Liam, was a mixture of emotions. Initially, shock, disbelief. They thought there had been a mistake, that it was some kind of cruel joke. But when my lawyer called to confirm and the agent got in touch to book a photo shoot, they knew I was serious. Shock quickly turned to fury. My phone started ringing off the hook with calls from unknown numbers or Liam's, followed by a series of voicemail messages full of curses, abuse, and threats. "You really dare to do this, bitch? I'll burn this house down before you sell it. I'm never moving out. Try kicking me out. You'll regret it for the rest of your life for treating your parents like this." Then when the threats didn't work, the tone turned to crying, begging, recounting the gratitude for giving birth and raising me, hitting the compassion they thought I still had. "My child, don't be so cruel. Mom and Dad know they were wrong. Please give Mom and Dad more time. The neighbors are looking. Where can Mom and Dad hide their faces now? Don't you have any feelings for this family anymore?" But I was no longer the Jessica who could be swayed by tears or false affection. Mom's slap and Dad's squeeze had erased any illusions. I knew that if I gave in this time, the demands and abuse would never end. I instructed Liam to direct any communication or requests from my parents directly to Peterson's law office. I refused to speak directly. The battle for the house began. My parents refused to cooperate with the realtor. They tried every way to make things difficult, refusing to let potential buyers in at important times, deliberately leaving the house in disarray, even talking negatively about the poor condition of the house, which was largely due to their own lack of maintenance, to those who came to see it. They even went around telling their relatives and friends about their tragedy, painting a story in which they were poor, frail parents who were being pushed out into the street by their successful but unfilial and cold-blooded daughter because of a small conflict. Some distant relatives who did not understand the story called me, blaming me, advising me to think again, to forgive my parents. Pressure from many sides weighed heavily on me, but I refused to back down. Attorney Peterson had to send additional legal warning letters, clearly stating the owner's right to access the property for sale and the consequences if they continued to obstruct. Liam was stuck in the middle, extremely embarrassed. At first, under pressure from his parents, he also called me several times, trying to convince me to withdraw my decision, saying that my parents already know their mistakes, that doing this will destroy the whole family. But when I firmly explained the whole story, especially the physical attack, and asked him to look at the truth instead of just listening to one side, Liam started to be quieter. The sale was a tense and dramatic affair. Open houses were held on weekends. My parents, the realtor said, were often reluctant to stay home during those sessions, sitting silently in the living room, facing the curious, scrutinizing eyes of strangers who came to view the house. It was a humiliating humiliation for people who valued their reputations. The news that Mr. and Mrs. Morgan were selling their house quickly spread through the quiet neighborhood, causing countless rumors and gossip. The facade of a model, well-off family that they had worked so hard to build was crumbling before the eyes of the public. As my parents were forced to clean and rearrange their home in preparation for sale at the broker's request to make the house more appealing, a few other facts about their true lifestyle came to light. Liam, in a tired voice, told me about it on the phone. He had discovered stacks of unpaid credit card bills hidden in his dad's desk drawer. The house, while in good shape on the outside, was in need of major repairs. Leaky roof, old plumbing, moldy walls, that had been neglected for years because they had no money or desire to pay for repairs. All the money seemed to have gone into maintaining the facade rather than the necessities. This underscored their extreme financial irresponsibility and partly explained why they were so desperate to take over my nice new apartment. Liam also said that after witnessing his father's irrational anger, his mother's constant blaming, and seeing for himself the true state of our family's finances, he began to understand things. He stopped calling me to try to convince me. Instead, he said he was tired and just wanted it to end. Although he didn't directly apologize for his parents, I sensed a change in Liam's demeanor, a tacit acknowledgement that I had a valid reason for my actions, no matter how painful they were. Our sibling relationship, though strained, perhaps still had a glimmer of hope. After nearly 3 months of stress and petty legal wrangling, the house finally found a buyer at a reasonable price. I flew back to Dallas one day to sign the final papers at Peterson's law office, completing the sale. The proceeds, minus the brokerage and legal fees, were deposited into my account. I thought long and hard about what to do with the money. By law, it was mine, but I didn't want to be like my parents. I decided to keep the equivalent of the original amount I'd put down to save the house 7 years earlier, plus a small portion to account for interest and depreciation over time. The rest, which was no small amount, I asked Attorney Peterson to put into a temporary trust account under her control, just so my parents could draw from it to pay for a few months' rent and initial living expenses. It was a final act of kindness, a fine line between justice and compassion. I owed them nothing more. The 60-day deadline finally arrived. My parents, left with no choice, were forced to move out of the house they had lived in for most of their lives. Liam and Sarah came to help them pack. Aunt Susan recalled that it was a sad and somewhat depressing scene. They had to leave behind a lot of their belongings because their new apartment was too small to accommodate them. They moved into a run-down, low-rent apartment complex in a much less safe area than Naperville. Their way of life was turned upside down. No more yard, no more open space, no more familiar neighbors to brag about. They were faced with the harsh realities of living frugally, with bills they now had to manage on their own. The social image they had worked so hard to maintain was shattered. It was the natural consequence, the only just punishment for their violence, greed, and irresponsibility. I didn't see them the day they moved out. I think it was better for both of us. No goodbyes, no forced reconciliation. Just the end of a toxic, tired chapter. Although the sadness of my family's irreparable breakup was still there, the overwhelming feeling I had was one of relief and release. The financial and emotional burden I had carried for years was finally lifted. I had protected the fruits of my labor, my future. My $650,000 condo in Austin was now truly mine. A safe haven, free from prying eyes, free from unreasonable demands. I was free. A year has passed since that horrible Thanksgiving. My life has stabilized and is even better than before. My career continues to flourish. I have more time for myself, for personal interests, for healthy friendships. I have traveled more, explored new lands with my own money. My relationship with Liam has improved. He and Sarah still call from time to time. We don't talk about the past much, but there is a mutual respect and understanding between us. He's trying to be more independent and build his own family. Perhaps the lesson of his parents' collapse was also a wake-up call for him. I completely cut off contact with my parents. I knew it was best for my mental health. Aunt Susan would occasionally update me on them. Their lives were still hard, they still resented me, but it wasn't my problem anymore. I did what I had to do. That slap and the painful squeeze that day not only left bruises on my skin, it also carved a deep scar in my soul. A painful lesson about family boundaries, about greed and betrayal in the place that seemed the safest. It destroyed my family in ways I never imagined, but at the same time, it also freed me from a toxic relationship that had been silently eating away at me for years. Selling the house in my name, filled with childhood memories, was not a cruel act of revenge. It was the final and necessary act of self-defense of a child who had been pushed to the limit. Sometimes, to build a peaceful and solid path for your own future, you must bravely destroy toxic bridges, no matter how painful it is. The line between love, filial piety, and blind indulgence and sacrifice in the family is sometimes fragile and difficult to distinguish. What is the red line that we should never allow others, even our parents, to cross? When faced with unreasonable demands, mental and financial abuse, or even violence from your loved ones, how will you choose to protect yourself, your property, and your future? Will you endure in silence, try to reconcile, or firmly set a steel boundary? Please share your thoughts and stories.